Hi, it's Shawn Kim, cinematographer of Ozark's final season, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we speak with Shawn Kim, director of photography of Ozark Season 4. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I am very excited to have you. I think we reached out to you the first time for kidding, and it ended up just not working out for scheduling, but I loved that show. And I mean, Ozark, we've covered every single season of Ozark. So we are Ozark believers here, and I'm very excited to talk to you about this new season. But before we get there, I just want to mention our sponsor for today, Filmmakers Academy. Master your craft at filmmakersacademy.com. We'll be hearing more from them later in the episode. And I also want to encourage you to follow us on your favorite podcast app, as well as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, where you can not only hear the show, but see the show. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. So, Shawn, before we started rolling, you were just telling me, like, you are, after such a long period with Ozark, you're kind of at a point right now where you're turning down some work, enjoying some relaxation. Like, where are you at?
Yeah, so, Ozark took me to Atlanta for like the better part of 13 months. And it was great because, my girlfriend's a DP, she's shooting American Horror Stories right now. And
what's her name?
Shasta Spawn. And so she got to come out and visit a bunch. I had my dogs out there. I had my son out there for the first 6 months because it was still pandemic. And I mean, it's still pandemic now, but it was during lockdown and they were remote learning. And that's a large part of why I agreed to this length of a project and so intense. I'm never going to be able to have my kid on location for months at a time. I mean, I'd still be somewhat responsible a parent. So that was a deciding factor in me saying yes. There's so many, I was kind of worried about how it was going to go down there with the challenges of COVID. And I don't think we were one of the first ones back, but it was definitely one of the earlier major productions back, and everyone was still trying to figure it out. Up until then, during COVID, we had started some remote shooting, with commercials and things like that. But, started hearing, like, my girlfriend got a call to do Shasta got a call to do Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, and that went early because it was filming in Vancouver. I think a lot of Vancouver stuff started filming earlier. And then, the Atlanta stuff, New York stuff started opening up. So I guess they took a shot and went for it. I think I went out there in September of, I don't even picture the year. Is that 2020?
I know.
Yeah, I guess it's 2020. I don't know. Like every memory, I had to add like a year and a half for that gap of COVID.
I'm with you 100%. So you did a lot of virtual stuff, or maybe not a lot, but you were sort of dabbling in the virtual stuff during that time.
It was because everyone was kind of sitting around and really freaking out, and like no productions for sure. The big narrative shows were all shut down, one after, and then I think it was like maybe mid-March of 2020. It was like the last productions had shut down, and for about a month and a half, everyone's trying to figure out what to do. And then, some of my old clients in the advertising world started kind of poking around saying, can we do something? And so I work with Michel Gondry a lot on commercials especially. And he had a couple of big, Facebook projects, Amazon projects, a couple things. And they were like, can we somehow do these, remote? And we kind of figured out how to, drop off not just cameras, but like lighting and your regular basic kind of ENG type of stuff. And then, of course, with Gondry involved, he's like, can we get motion control over there? Like, I don't know. But we got pretty up to it. I got to get some of my crew, back working. Some productions were starting to do remote stuff where they're like, oh, we don't even need a DP. We just get the director, like, just do FaceTime commercials. And it was so lame. But but we were doing like scenes at actors' houses and things, and it was it got pretty complex, and I was kind of proud of like getting like a pretty big production off the ground. It was like a 7-day shoot with a full quote unquote crew. My keys were on, kind of talking through the actor to like, that's how you would set a C-stand, and this, so that all the unions were involved. It was it was kind of felt like everything was going to be okay.
Yeah, no, we did a ton of remote work commercial work here in Boston is where I am. So I'm a commercial director, and we do a bunch of that. Yeah. But it was like once anybody caught wind that it could be done, there was a lot of demand for it. But my God, it already kind of is when you look back at the projects from that time. But there's a look to the kind of pandemic filmmaking. There really is.
One step up from that really was, I had gotten calls to just, everyone's so desperate that they were doing, like, can you set up a tabletop setup at your living room? And we did with a giant softbox and everything. And, I shoot a lot of product, and we ended up shooting a bunch of product, and that stuff looked like normal because it was all small. But slowly but surely that started going, and then you started hearing some scripts coming in, some projects coming in, and Ozark was definitely, one of the first ones that came up on the radar. A number of projects had come up, but nothing really great that I was, I was like, that's going to be a mess. I don't use that word, but Ozark being Ozark, and all the people involved, that got my attention, and I was kind of going back and forth. And when I found out my son could come and all these other things, and it's just hard to turn down the final season of Ozark. And, I had a conversation with Jason Bateman, who that's the kind of Kidding connection. He was an executive producer on Kidding. So I think there's a little bit of connection. Yeah. It was one of those, I think he had signed an earlier deal or something, but he ended up, him and his producing partner were part of Kidding. So he had kind of, known about that production and such. So they kind of reached out, and, the more I heard about it, I knew about it from the business, but talk about a filmmaker's show.
Why do you say that?
Jason really kind of took the reins as towards the vision of the show from the pilot and all throughout, and he is absolutely involved in every aspect of the show. And the first thing he told me was, if you ever need any help, if you ever need a producer's help, you have an EP right here, right in front of you all the time. And it was he really kind of lived up to that. Anytime there was an issue, you just bring it up to him, and he'd magically just get it done in the studio. And like, oh, here's all this stuff. But the way that Ben Kutchins and Armando Salas and all the other DPs that were involved, from the beginning had kind of set it up was, the look is such an important, integral part of the show, as most fans know, is that, that cyan, that cool little vibe to it. And the thing that I loved the most was really that pilot episode really hit me really hard. It looked like noir, like modern neo-noir filmmaking, and just that high ratio contrast. And I think they got a lot of flack for it being too dark.
Oh, they certainly did. Oh yeah, so, even on this show, because we get questions from our audience prior to the interviews, and it's like, I remember that first season when it came out. So many people were like, "Oh, I can't even see it. I can't see faces on my screen," and it's weird to me that it got pushback because it was like, but everybody loved. Especially at 5 years ago or so. Everybody really loved that dark cinematography look. That was really appealing then, certainly still is now. But it was weird that there was something about that show that people had a visceral reaction to the color choices and the exposure choices in a way that I really haven't heard with anything else that we've covered on the show.
Yeah. And it's like, if people will compare it to maybe that first pilot to that night episode in Game of Thrones. And I'm like, well, that was literally just black too. Now, Faking's awesome, but I loved it too. But, I kind of maybe get that, but Ozark is such a specific, genre. And I know it's very popular, but it's about money laundering set in, Ozark, Missouri. It's with a bunch of scary people. It's supposed to be dark. So when in my initial conversation with JB, I was like, I'm a huge fan of that. And I know that they've, that it expanded the look for sure, and gotten more craft and a little more light. And, especially season 3 was a kind of a big lift. And I loved it. So the challenge was, how do you take that and bring something that I liked, texture and density and darkness? And so then I went up to JB and said, look, my idea, I came up with a lookbook. Not that, you're continuing a look, but you need to develop it.
It needs to develop over time. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially when you're closing out such a beloved show like this. This is the final season, and we knew that, and we knew it was going to be in 2 parts. And so how, do you do you close it out to develop from season 3 to the final season? And then even within the final season, there is a hopefully people notice, but there's a visual arc that kind of goes through it, even with the depth of field or lighting ratios and whatnot. And so what I had wanted was, I spoke when I was speaking to JB. I said, I not that I want to bring the look of the pilot back, but kind of bringing it back full circle, because a lot of the episodes have these flashbacks, especially in the second half. There's flashbacks to the first episode. So, kind of as we get closer to the end. So I was like, let's have this as a motif. And, I want to, ring true to some of the stuff that was, started out in that first episode. And I was like, it's more like a modern neo-noir, kind of back to that vibe. And he was like, tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean? Like, how dark? Well, it's not darker. It's just, density in black, and color contrast, and just a little bit more separation, and flesh tones being a little bit more than just silver as they were before. Whereas I loved it. The show kind of had a little bit more of a monochromatic look to it, which, definitely we kept, but you just lift certain areas up just a little bit, a little different, so that there is a reference to the first 3 seasons, but now we are, in this trajectory where things are coming to a head. And as most people could guess, towards the very end, everything just collides, so just kind of setting up a little bit of maybe visual uneasiness at times, it's a very shallow focus show as well. But, in the first part of it, it was, I had pushed it using these Noctilux f.95 lenses that are, and I don't know how the first, the focus puller, Liam Sinnett, one of the best.
What was it called? I want to do a quick search.
It's the Leica Noctilux. It's a legendary stills lens, which it opens up to a t.95. Not quite Barry Lyndon level, but it's pretty crazy. And on medium format, on large format chips, which they went to in the 3rd season to the Venice chips, it's pretty intense, pretty amazing. So these were rehoused ones. They had a set from season 3 of rehoused Leica Rs, including the Noctilux added to that. And the show basically uses, 3 lenses. It's the 50mm Noctilux, the 35mm Leica R, and the 80mm Leica R. Those are the other 2, the 35 and the 80 are the Summoluxes, the ones that go to 1.4. So those 3 have a very distinct look, but a lot of the show, the majority of the show is filmed either on the 35 or the 50, but the 50 there's weeks that go by that it's just super glued to the camera, like we never change. And I love movies that, like a Michael Clayton, that's all 50mm lenses. It gives the viewer a sense of place, psychologically, I think, within the visual narrative there. So,
well, talk to me a little bit more about that. What does a 50mm do for a story like yours? Like what? Well, just aesthetically, it looks great, obviously. I think, what does it do as a viewer? How do viewers interpret a 50? And also, by the way, I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes, the lens, so you guys can check it out on our website. But my God, an f/0.95.
Before we get to that, like there's very, very few of these Noctiluxes left in existence, and to find a clean example of not just that, but a full set of Leica Rs, because I needed more than one set, because we used multiple cameras on the show. We're a single camera at a time show, but a lot of times we'll pre-rig or pre-set up or have a second unit go off and do something. So I needed another set made. So I called Antoine up at Cineoptics in London, and I said, look, I need a set. I'm going to get in trouble here, but I need a set of these as soon as possible. And this is right when I signed on. I said, you got 6 weeks. Do you think you can do it? And he's like, no, but I'm going to give it a shot. And and the MFer did it. He did it. He got it done in 6 weeks. I don't know how. And it's one of the most beautiful sets. I'll never part with it. But it was special. So thank you, Antoine from Synoptics again, and the guys at TLS. They knocked it out of the park. Anyway, sorry. But anyway, so going back to the focal length.
Well, we were talking about like what does a 50? So, how does a 50mm translate to the viewer? What does it mean? Yeah,
to me, a 50mm in the days of 35mm film in that image size. A 50 millimeter was a little bit longer than what was normally considered, normal human field of view, which was in the 30s, in my opinion, like a 32 millimeter in the 35 millimeter chip size, film gate size, correlated to that. But with these larger format chips, a 50 becomes a bit more like a 38 mil, 40 mil, so it comes closer to your standard human field of vision, where you can present a wide scene as if you're there, standing there in person. But what really is the power of these lenses, especially with the close focus ability, but also the hyper shallow depth of field, is once you start getting close to subject, it gets claustrophobic and you don't even know where to focus because there's one eyelash in focus. And it really, really directs the viewer's eye to what you kind of want to see, but there's also so much extra texture around. And within a scene, that's really kind of builds, visual character in that it's truthful to the scene where, whatever it may be, Marty is really, really stuck in between a rock and a hard place, and he has decisions to make. So you can see what's kind of going on in the background and blobbery, but the focus is really there, and it really makes you feel. And it's not just like using a telephoto lens or a tight lens and getting that shot just this close. It's something different to have a slightly wider lens like a 50 being that close and that claustrophobic, and you think you can almost see breath. You can see. It's like
it's less. Anxiety. It's almost less about the foreground and more about the background. What those
almost
lenses do.
It is. You're absolutely getting the viewer within a depth. On the Z-axis. You're inviting them to explore depth within the space and hopefully within the character, obviously. And then sometimes we would just move without correcting for focus, and then you would be straining. The viewer would be straining to kind of stay with it for a second. There's a great shot. And again, Liam probably hates me for saying this because to him it was messed up. But it's the end of episode 7 when Ruth is in the truck and she's driving. It's the last shot of the episode, and she belts out this fuck, and it just cuts out. But that was take one. We rolled on the rehearsal, and she's sitting there, and the camera's moving in, and it's a F1 on a slider that's moving into the subject.
Oh my god!
And then she just takes a pause, and as Julia does, and she's an amazing, just a sight to behold. Just witnessing just this explosion of, creativity, brave bravado, jumps into the ether with her acting. So she just kind of leans back, and it goes way out of focus for a second. And then as we're getting closer, try to catch up, she just bolts forward and, explodes. And it just, technically it's a mistake, but it is just perfect. But that type of lens really let you fall into a beautiful mistake.
I love that, and I'm guessing Liam was your focus puller?
And he's like, "We're doing that again, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're gonna do it like 7 more times, but they're using that one." And he's just like, I'm like, "Don't worry, they're gonna think it's genius." Sorry, Liam. I mean, he did it on purpose. He totally did it on purpose. Sorry.
Can you kind of tell when a shot, can you kind of tell which one is going to be used at certain moments?
Oh yeah, for sure. But there's a lot of moments like that where you get a certain sense, and a lot of times it's not magic. It's just that's kind of the best range that we got, and you kind of tell. But there are moments where you're rolling a take, especially on a set like this, where the acting is so insanely dynamic and complementary, and they'll get into a visual fist fight, not an actual fist fight, but just so you can kind of feel it coming, and then you just get the hairs kind of stand up on your neck, and you're like, ooh, this is one of those magic takes. And then and you hope they use it, and on other shows, other projects, other films, you kind of just, you're at their mercy. But this show obviously has some of the best editors in the world, and I'm like, I have no qualm, I have no concern that they're gonna use the right one. So that's what I mean, and the level of, and that actually that leads to such a high level of technical execution on part of the crew that's been there since the beginning, and And I've worked with a lot of these guys on other projects in the past. I've known Liam since he started the business, and Edison Jackson, the gaffer, amazing. I've worked with them on some commercials, and it's in Landon, the key grip. This is a insanely grip heavy show where and this is again going back to like this perfect setup for filmmakers. They just had it set up where, and I kind of took it over the edge maybe, where at all the exteriors, there's no sun. There's no sun in Ozark. There's never brightness in Ozark. We just cover the area with multiple 30 by 30 lulls and condors, just black it out and then relight from underneath and to reintroduce, what we want out of it. And I'm like, I can't believe I get to do this on a television show. And things are scheduled around that, and it is a cinematographer's dream where they're just, they're like, not all the time. A lot of times you have to willingly concede so that you can get more scenes, that make more shots that make a scene better than as opposed to one beautiful shot, there's a balance in between there that needs to
You're saying that the cinematographer's dream part of it is being given the time to do that type of stuff? Is that,
it's the pressure to take as much time as you really need to craft every shot. And I mean, it's the amount of, it's a TV show, so you're still on time budget and a monetary fiscal budget as well. But not once did I feel cramped by any of those normal.
Wow, that's amazing.
It was to the point where if you went a little too fast, you fuck everything up. So you kind of, not that you're slowing down, but you really take your time and you just kind of sit and pause, and it gives you that moment where you're not panic rushing to get things done. Of course, there are times that it happens. You're shooting in Georgia, through technically 5 seasons of weather. And in the summertime, you get lightning delays that just shut you down for the whole day or hours at a time, and you got to make that up. So, of course, there's and it's a location-heavy show, so there are the normal challenges of filmmaking and also TV schedules. But really, really didn't feel it very much on this at all, and it was a blessing.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into your lighting techniques for our daytime exteriors. You had mentioned in Ozark, you had mentioned just a few minutes ago that you took the time to block out. You said there is no sun on Ozark. So I mean, that's not from me. That is a continuation from what they've developed over the years. Well, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, how much of an exaggeration is that? Like, are you truly, honestly putting up blacks up there, or are you doing silks, or what is your strategy for?
I don't know when I'm allowed
exteriors?
To show this stuff. I'm talking, a parking lot of a motel.
You're allowed to. We'll keep it quiet, right? All right. You're among family.
I'll send
on
you
Go Creative Show.
A couple stills that just tickled me. It's just hilarious. I was like,
oh yes, please do send them.
I mean, it's like exterior of Lazio Motel. You have 2 30 by 30, solids on truss that on these manipulatable platforms called lulls. They're like pettibones. They're like gradles, and they have telescoping cranes, and they reach out and blot it out. And then we have upwards of 4 to 10 condors with 20-foot by 20-foot blacks on the perimeter, as well as black solids all around the floor. It got to the point where I was like, we're making this on stage in the outside. It wasn't like that all the time. I mean, obviously, it depends on the conditions. Sometimes it was just for light control. Sometimes it's for contrast. Even when it's a dark, gloomy, overcast day, I get a little pushback from production, thinking, why are we doing the same thing? Because there's no sun. But it's about the feeling and the density and the depth of the shadows. And when you have a overcast day like that in the exterior, it tends to be pretty flat and even. So then we still do use the same approach. Overall, the MO is always to make the show feel like it's coming out of naturalism. It's always based in reality and naturalism, but it's just a very specific viewpoint. So you could do natural lighting, but it depends on your entire viewpoint. Where you are. Are you under a blade of grass? Are you over a tree looking down? So you just take advantage of that. But as opposed to moving the camera to do it, trying to move the earth to our camera. So
I'm actually surprised. I'm surprised to hear how much you black out, because it does. I mean, Ozark has such a natural look. It really looks like you're just outside.
It is. They're once you get into higher levels of craft, this is my philosophy. But once you get into higher levels of craft, those minute differences, the differences become less and less and smaller. But in my mind, much more critical, because that is really what separates good from great. And it's kind of this ever and never-ending quest to maximize those tiny little differences. So it's great. You want the cinematography to be invisible outside of the overall vibe of the show, and the changes that you make shouldn't be noticeable, in my opinion. But you have to do service to the script and the narrative of the project and the narrative of each episode, and you need to give each shot, each scene, each episode, each season its own texture and as a part of it, because you need to give the actors and the writers that that the ability to play in that type of visual playground.
Aside from
so good.
Aside from the deeper shadows and the more like robust blacks, like you had mentioned, does having your set blacked out, for lack of a better term, does that afford you any additional like logistical benefits? Does it
100%? Because then we don't. There are a number of episodes this season, especially, that really are kind of light dependent. Like it's in the scripts that like it's always high noon or whatever, or it's all and it absolutely lets you, like being on a stage, extend the day or manage the day better, and you can do multiple scenes in a row that take place at a very specific time of day, as opposed to constantly trying to shift and move. So in a way, there's a lot of work and setup in the beginning, but it saves you a lot of time throughout the day, because you're not having to move and constantly adjust as the sun's moving, because we just black that whole thing out. I'm exaggerating. It's very, very, not very often are we really blacking out. You have to make that call in the morning, and you're like, how can I get away with a half dome here? And then because the sun's never gonna, and it's not gonna, there's no white buildings across the street that's gonna bounce off of it to change the relative values on our set. So you do a little bit of triage depending on the schedule, and then you lean on, I've shot in Georgia a number of times, but not for that length of time. So you lean on the guys that have been on the ground for 3 years, and what are the atmospheric changes? Once you start feeling a barometer, is this where the clouds are going to get darker? And so keeping that in mind, or we'll get afternoon winds, traditionally during this time. So I'm not putting up a ton of verticals that will have to come down, and then you lose what you started with because of wind. It's a challenging environment shooting in Georgia, and we're a lot of the places are pretty far outside the city and pretty remote. You just kind of have to make do with what you have set, your game plan set on the day. Thankfully, it's a big production, so they carried almost everything.
Filmmakers Academy is packed with tons of courses and all the subjects that us here at Go Creative Show want to learn about. One of which that is near and dear to my heart is commercial directing. And it's taught by Jordan Byrde. And Jordan, I wanted to ask you a quick question, because something you mentioned in your course that I just love is your strategy for running your shoot days. And I know we don't have enough time to get into all of it. That's what the course is for. But can you give us a little tip that you can share with our audience about how to run a successful shoot day?
Sure. A real specific one that I like to teach is try not to start with the wide shot. Now, the DP and the first assistant director and the producer, they all want to start with the wide shot. Like a movie, you do the wide shot, then you do the coverage. No, not in a commercial. Why? Because the wide shot barely makes the edit, but it takes all this energy and time to get going. And then the ad agency in your own mind is dissecting that wide shot for a performance that's going to be on the cutting room floor. I mean, what I just gave you right there, Ben, is gold.
And there's so much more of it in your entire course. So check it out for yourself at filmmakersacademy.com. I want to talk about the Byrde's home in Ozark season 4. I'm always amazed by how, cinematographers, directors of photography, everything, art department, the whole thing, how you consistently make locations that you see all the time feel fresh and different and change with the moods of the moment. And there's an episode in particular, I want to say it was episode 3, I'm not 100% sure, where this house is kind of known for that long hallway with the wall of glass that goes from the bedroom to the kitchen or living room or whatever that is. And I think it's episode 3, I want to say, where you really are using that hallway and playing with distances, and you went down it multiple times, up it and down it, and you had characters walking along it, and it's like...
I think it's that Steadicam water, I think, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's just the way that you made that hallway look menacing and scary and like a real crossroads in these people's lives. And I mean, we could dive into that particular thing, but the broader topic is that home, having to shoot in that home so many pages across so many years. And I know you're only doing season 4, but the audience knows what that place looks like, and you have to keep it fresh. How are you approaching the Byrde's home?
Yeah, that house is the second you step in it as a fan, and you know every corner, like you're saying. And then your immediate thought is, what am I going to do different? Like, it's just the same thing. But I'm going to tell you, I can't tell you how crazy this house is, how lucky they were to have it. It is one of the stars of the series.
Oh, yeah.
It continually gives new angles and shots. And I'm doing shots, and the camera operator's like, we've never done this. I'm like, how have you not done this shot? You've done every angle here. It's such a photogenic house. The angles, and it's just all randomness, kind of a mid-century modern, lake house vibe, but it's just, there's no right angles to anything. So, and this is a very rectilinear show that you have to, get all these lines really, and your vanishing points really perfect. And this house just kept giving and giving, and I was blown away by it. But we do quite a bit of work. I mean, we put tons of ND gel on the windows of varying degrees, and we have them on panels, and we just pop them in and out. They've had that, I think, since season 3, to quickly change the levels of light coming into the room, so that you'd have a shot where you're looking out this corner in the living room, and then those windows will have ND6 on them or something, and then everything else will either be blacked out or diffusion light being pushed into it, or different levels of NDs, heavier and lighter. And there's definitely, it's like a NASCAR pit crew, just bolting things on, running, and it's, they have the system down, from 3 years of doing this. So I was amazed at the efficiency of the crew to get this stuff implemented. But it's, sometimes there's a shot where, you will look at it like, it doesn't need anything. Let's just go, and you're never, and there's a lot of some resistance to stuff like that, because people used to, no, we have to, I think we're good. And in being the new guy, it's a lot of pressure on it. And I'm like, I hope it speaks. But you have to kind of come in and change some of the technique a little bit. And I think that's part of it, that when you come in, you have a different point of view. You're kind of naive, and you have questions, and it gets people to thinking, oh, did we do that in season 1? Or no, we did that here. And it gets them it gets everyone in a mode of finding something new. And in a house that's been shot that much, it's amazing that we did that to the very last episode, So it's a cool house, and they're very, very lucky, but difficult. It's right on the water. And
it's a real house. I think a lot of people wouldn't even assume it was real because you're in it so much.
I mean, we have some things that we've cut out, but it's not, when you walk in, it looks like a living, a regular livable house. There's nothing gutted. There have been things that have been implemented that are more film friendly for sure, but nothing that you can really see, because you can't, because we shoot 360 everywhere, every good planning. So, and you have ceilings, you have all these limitations, and it's up on a little bit of a hill. So to get all these lifts in, because we're doing the same thing. We're blacking out the sky, and, blacking out entire sides of ambient light. And it's really tricky the weather is being right on the lake, tons of lightning shutdowns, tons of weather, but not once did it feel challenging. Oddly enough, you just felt it was this constant organic process, and this house was a living, breathing character for sure. Did not disappoint in person.
What was your camera package on Ozark?
I continued it. I stayed the same. We had tested a number of different cameras, and I had sent Jason over a bunch of camera tests and lighting tests and lens tests. We thought, even so, that part of the deal maybe of me maybe expanding on the look a little bit with lighting, and then we keep consistency, and some technical consistency was good. From Jason all the way up to Netflix. So it's the Venice camera systems, and we carry 3 bodies. We'd have 2 main cameras and then a third as a backup, and then one that could go into Rialto mode, which we use quite often. It's this kind of tethered miniature, scaled down brains only part of the camera that you can.
What is that called? Rialto mode?
Yeah, it's the you can just basically take apart the regular Venice and then just use the brains for acquisition with the lens. And so it was and we shot. It's a 6K camera, but because we have the Leicas fully cover 6K, the Leica Rs. But we also carried a set of Leica Summicrons, which don't necessarily cover larger format. But if you scale down from 6K to 5.7K, it was all in the usable image area. So those are kind of like backups in case we got into a jam and I need a different focal length or a longer, a different look even, because they do look a little different. To be able to employ those, just to have a safety net. As kind of a comfort zone, we shot. I think they started that in season 3 to shoot it in 5.7K. So you have, and we also, shoot with a 10% look around, so in case you need any stabilization and whatnot. But that larger chip definitely helps with all that. I think prior to that they had been using Varicam. I think it was a Super 35 size chip. But going to the Venice, I think a lot of people noticed the expansion of the look in season 3. There was a lot more depth. There's a lot more, color information. There's a lot more resolution, and it was a cleaner image, things like that. So we took the same lenses, took the same camera packages from season 3, maybe added a couple little specialty things here and there. I at the beginning of the season we employed the use of like low angle prisms so we could scrape across the floor on these little tracking shots, or scrape along the wall. And things like that, but just a little bit of expansion on the technical side in terms of camera and lenses. But the changes were more, again, lighting ratios and color and such. And again, not noticeable, hopefully, but little manipulations, little changes.
I'm looking at that Rialto mode as you're talking. I had not heard of this. And for those that don't know, I put a link to it in the show notes so you guys can check it out. But it looks basically like you have basically like the size of a DSLR,
right,
tethered to the body of the camera. There's even pictures here with like probably an AC wearing a backpack kit with the camera and the operator with that. So is that how you guys were using?
For sure, it can be cumbersome. We never used it as like a handheld quick thing. It was always a specialty where we want to get a shot
into tight places,
into the cabinet, or inside of the bookshelf, or especially a lot of car work. It helps with car work quite a bit. And it because it's also where there's definitely a language to the angle of the shots, where we're in a Fincher-esque way. There's very little tilt on the show. It's very zero tilt. It's a zero tilt show. So where the dolly grip is a de facto camera operator, because if I need to look down, you boom down to the place. You boom up to the place. In the same mode of using fewer lenses, it's taking the viewer and putting them there as opposed to just directing them, and you're physically going to these places and to maintain kind of like rectilinear vanishing points and lines. So the Rialto helps a lot when you can't shove a big camera and you still have to stay level. The Rialto, is much smaller. So inside of a car, you can get up, closer to the ceiling or whatnot. So it wasn't just replacement; it was also keeping flexibility with given our visual language, which we added to a bit more. We added much more of a kind of a specialty down tilt, 30-degree. I still kept it somewhat mathematical. So if we weren't level, it'd be 15 degrees or 30 degrees or 45 degrees down in terms of tilt. Sorry, now I'm rambling. Getting off.
No, I want to actually talk a little bit more about the camera motion in the series because I did sort of notice that there was some new angles, if you like, and you can't even really. You can pick them out as you're watching it, but it's just a general feel that the angles are seeming more, I guess, angular, for lack of a better word. They're more, there's a rigidity in it, like even tighter than previous seasons.
Yeah, there's definitely carries on the legacy of the show from the beginning, which is, again, zero tilt. And as you move, the world is presented on a zero tilt. But, every show has differences in episodes past, they've added and broken that rule or whatnot. Sure. And one thing I think we did more this season as kind of a very steady motif was whenever there was an important character moment, we'd have a close-up. And it's like Ruth at the Lazio Motel looking up at the sign before she goes to buy it. You can see that one shot. It's a 30-degree angle down with a 35 millimeter lens closer to the subject with a diopter on it, so that even more of the world falls away, and you just feel like you're looking like the subject is in cellophane or something. Yeah, and it's a very, very pretty angle. It's a very beautiful look, but we kind of hit on that, and I said, let's keep doing this as a motif, and I think it shows up in episodes quite often at pivotal moments of character, or like right before a fork in the road or whatnot. It was kind of meant to give a little bit of a visual marker that is a little different than the show's language, but still within the language. That it's hopefully invisible, but there's something there, and I love that psychological push-pull of having the audience lulled into comfort of, oh, I know what this is. I've been here before many, many times for 3 years. But there's something different, not enough to be, to take away from the script or the character, but to accent it. And only in those moments where you do something, we'll do it on a character introduction where it's a little unnerving. And it's like you kind of want it makes the viewer kind of want something. They don't know what it is, and they're just kind of antsy about it. And it's easier to do when there's such a strong look established, that when you just change it a little bit, sometimes it falls flat, but oftentimes it serves as a sense of that kind of unnervingness, because by this time everyone's been pretty used to this world and these characters, and season 3 ended with just Deb blowing away the lawyer, Helen, and then Helen, and we start off in the bathroom with them picking her brains out. So there's and it's like a shot across the bow. Things are going to get not just more intense as you may think, but things are going to get complicated and unnerving at times. So how do we help that in the visual language? How do we, even just a little bit with focus, and even with framing, where this is the perfect frame. We all love it. Let's just a bit and add this one little thing. And it's a little bit of that Rosemary's Baby where the viewer's like, well, it should here, but
yeah.
And it's not meant to be conscious at all. It's just a little subconscious, little tick. It's that. You know what I'm talking about in the Rosemary's Baby.
100%.
Of course, and then everyone uses it, but to use that type of psychology in the slightest way, it's so difficult, because you want to go overboard and make people, duck down on the train or whatever on the projection.
Exactly.
You don't need that on a show like this. The show does it for you, and the audience does it for you. And I think it was Alex Zakharov, and I didn't work with him on his episodes, but him and I would have discussions, and the way he talked about it, like, you never give the audience everything. Let them let them come to you halfway, and then you bring them something
Yeah.
halfway. And somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the messy middle, is where that deliciousness lies. So, and it is very true, because the fans of the show are pretty sophisticated. I think they're maybe they're not all filmmakers, but they have good taste. they have they know what they like.
We get a question from somebody on our Instagram and is a fan of the show, clearly. Nadia on Instagram, thank you for your question. The question is, how do you create the dark blue-green tint? And I know we talked a little bit about it earlier in the show, but is there like a secret sauce? Is it mostly in post, or are there things that you're doing on set practically?
Oh, no, it's all, there's very, very little. Tim Stippen is the colorist, and he's come up with a beautiful look over the years, but there's not a lot that we shift. We'll correct and we'll mold and we'll adjust, but there's no post filter that we just slap on and it turns into Ozark. It's all kind of baked in. So we do, if you're outside, we'll shoot at lower color temps, so that it looks a little cooler on camera. And sometimes it's with a little bit of the lighting and even so far as, we didn't employ it a lot, but the guys have like light blue tinted rags that we're using as bounces and things like that. So there's a lot that's done. Most of it is done and baked into the chip, into the film, for sure. And in post, you set it back, but it's tricky because you can't just overlay one process and just make it cooler. As you bring it cooler, you got to add warmth in parts so that your eye can discern the level of coolness. You got to give those markers. So it's not as simple as like, put the blue filter on or put the cyan filter on.
Yeah, because it still has to look like people.
Yeah.
It has to look like skin and wood and gravel and grass and water. If you push too hard in the color, it starts to just become unrealistic. You can't relate to it.
Yeah, and there's a difference in this season too. I think we did a little cooler outside, and then in the birdhouse went a little warmer too. So there's that color contrast as well, and it kind of plays with and challenges what you've been used to on the show, but in very, very subtle, again, hopefully, barely perceptible ways. And what was I gonna say? So there'd be a scene where you want to, in my mind, a lot of that Ozark coolness comes from a menace or a threat, to me. And when there's a character that's about to face this new menace or threat, but they're not sure, what I would do sometimes is make sure their skin tones were still quote unquote normal and not have that, cyan cast to it. So you have the scene in a little cooler light, whether it's lighting or gels or whatnot, and you have the background's cooler, but the subject has a slightly warmer light, so that when we print it down and when we print it to that Ozark look, they look neutral, and then the background recedes into that coolness, because it's you have to have separation, you have to have color separation, you have to have some visual indicator that shows you how dark or cool you're getting, otherwise your eyes will adjust, and by the middle of the episode it looks normal.
And I imagine it's exciting for you to also have the ability to have the Mexico scenes where you completely just go the opposite end. You're in more of kind of the orange warm world. That has got to be kind of fun. Yeah. Just being able to play in that world a little bit.
It is. And there's the difference between those two worlds, It's awesome because on one hand you can just go real dumb and obvious and go, we'll just make them look totally different. But that's easy and that's lazy. It's like, how do you make them different? By bringing them actually closer and closer and closer together as the season.
What'd you do?
It's the color, just playing with color temperatures mostly in camera color temperatures. But we had multiple LUTs. So there's a show LUT which we call Blue Crush because it's darker and crushed and bluer than before. And normally on a 4th season show, they're not bringing in DITs to set looks and whatnot, but they gave me so much support. I got to bring in my DIT, Ryan Nguyen, who just happened to be in between 2 Ridley Scott films, and he was able to come to Ozark for 3 weeks. So he came. He was there for a couple of weeks of prep, so that me and Ryan would be at Company 3, the color suite in Atlanta, and doing teleremote with our colorist in LA, and we would just work on different LUTs. We load up what they had used in season 3 and say, what do we keep and what do we adjust a little bit? So then we kind of came up with an overall, Ozark LUT to it, and then we came up with a separate, Mexico City LUT or Mexico LUT that were very different and true to, but there were different variances of it. So like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So towards, in the beginning, I think there was more of a difference. More of a definitive difference when you cut between the two scenes. Towards the end of the season, there's a little bit less of a difference, not just with color temperature, but I would just introduce more cooler lights, in certain areas in the cartel compound, and then warmer lights in Ozark, blue, cyan. So we have some tangerines and rust colors dotted a little bit more and more in there, so that there is that, that vortex in between of where these characters are, the struggles are in between this, and not just visually, but thematically as well. But
yeah. The last thing I want to talk to you about is there's a particular scene in episode 6. Now we ask all of our guests a little peek behind the curtain. We always ask our guests, are there particular scenes you want to discuss? Are there moments, episodes, shots, anything, just so that we can make sure it's not forgotten during the conversation. Yeah. And you had mentioned 2 scenes, one in episode 13, and I know that whole part of the series isn't even out. So I don't want to get into that one, but I do want to talk about the scene in episode 6 that you wanted to mention. So just give us, kind of bring us up to date with what this scene is and tell us what is kind of interesting about it that you wanted to share.
It's interesting because I wish I could start with the other one, so I'll just kind of tease it. I'm not going to ruin it for people, but it's it's an episode.
Well, if you can talk about the episode 13 without doing spoilers,
I will. I
mean, it's just not out, so
episode 13 is really, it's a penultimate episode, and it is really where everything cranks up. Everything is setting up for and it is the beginning. I think the episode's called the beginning, but it's all about weather, and it starts raining. And then this whole second half is pouring. So there's a sequence in it where a major event happens, and it's night, it's lightning, it's rain. That was insanely difficult to shoot. Very fun, and so that's on one level. What the episode 6, the reason why the episode 6 scene was so interesting to me is that it's the complete opposite of that. It's the scene where Ruth busts in and demands to know where she can find Hobby, the guy that killed. I would hope everyone's seen it by now, but had killed.
I think it's safe to assume people have seen the series.
Yeah, Darlene,
or at least this season.
Right. Hopefully, but he wants to find the killer of 2 people very, very dear, especially her cousin Wyatt. And sorry, I love
how you're trying not to spoil it, but you're just so clearly spoiling.
You better watch the goddamn series.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's just that's a scene loaded for playing to Julia's absolute strengths, and she's in there trying to control, not going too far, not going too low, and all you're doing is, how do I continue the look and craft of the show, yet totally fucking back? Sorry for cursing, but totally back off and allow her the room. But with this director, Andrew Bernstein, he likes a little bit of coverage. So how do I give everybody everything? So it was a challenge of this impossible task where you have to come up with this Herculean effort that will never get noticed, and it's to me, I love moments like that, those kind of challenges. So the challenges were about not just lighting consistency and whatnot. It was just coverage and trying to guess where it's Julia, it's Laura, it's Jason, 3 amazing actors that their dynamic changes as one moves and back and forth, and it's this fluid thing that we have blocking, we have marks. I'm like, it's a dream, sure. It's never gonna land that way, and sure enough, it's different every time. But you cannot get hung up in the technical things, because this is a major moment, first of all. But you have to give these actors room, and JB will be one where he's done this show so much, and he knows, and he's a director, so he helps you out. So he notices that somebody's stacking in front of him. He knows where the lens is, and he will just take a little shift over. Just lean, and I'm like, thank you. Or he'll know that if he moves over here, somebody will have to move with them, and they'll get the light that they need. And he's an amazing co-conspirator every step of the way. But Laura is one of the most accomplished and amazing actors of our generation, but Laura, Julia's style is so different. It's just this raw tempest, that comes in, and so then you're like, where is this all going to land? So you're just trying to preconceive the whole scene as it lays out, and you need a lot of coverage because that scene needs to be cutty. You can't just rely on a traditional Ozark oneer and be like, all right, that's all we need. So it was fun. It was fun that we were under so much duress, and I think we had a lightning shutdown that day. We lost 3 hours, and we're like, we had 6 hours, now we have 2 hours to do this. Everybody's freaking out. And I'm like, you know what? This is actually awesome, because this is where an amazing scene is either made or we totally fail. There's really nothing mediocre is going to come from this. Like, it's going to be horrible, and we'll have to reshoot it, or I get fired, or it'll be amazing, and it'll be amazing for all the right reasons. And it's like you're just growing new matter out of the ether, and it's one of my favorite scenes. It's just explosive, it's visceral, and I'm proud of the way we did it. But it was really just getting out of the way of the bull, But being that matador, it's you're directing, you're directing the allowance, you're giving them runway, and it's sorry, I'm mixing like 18 different metaphors, but
I'm here for it.
But it is.
Since you mentioned it in episode 13, which I haven't seen, nobody's seen it. You did mention the challenges of shooting in rainstorms, and
that's more of a typical thing, though. But it's like it's massive.
Well, talk to us about it. I mean, we don't get that opportunity to talk about this particular thing, in often on Go Creative Show. So it's fresh in your mind. You just mentioned it. Well, what were the challenges with
episode 13? Is the challenges were at the height. That's getting towards summer in Atlanta, and the conditions are changing left and right, and sometimes it's just perfect. It looks stormy, but to get this consistency, and we shoot everything out of order. So you're shooting that whole episode out of order, and you're trying to. It's so important that you get the lead up right, because the first half of the episode, everyone's talking about this storm coming, and it's like, it's the ending of the show storm, but it's a physical storm that's coming that has a lot to do with how the narrative plays out. And then towards the end, it hits. And so it's not just on and off. You're kind of prepping the audience for it. You're doing sound cues as opposed to, visual cues here and there. And you're slowly crafting it up. That's fine when you're working with almost everything outside of water and night. But when you're in water at night, it's really hard to kind of subtly, step that up, in scale, So there's the kind of typical challenges, but we had just these massive, city cranes with 100-foot, multiple branched, rain towers, rain rigs, and you just, again, saturating entire areas. And I'm normally producers would go, well, we only see this one part, so can we use a smaller rig and do that? And this show is so uncompromising. It's such an amazing filmmaker show that I was like, we're just going to put rain everywhere. And feel the limitations that characters have because of this storm and rain, and that we have, and it's not that every filmmaking moment has to be that goddamn visceral, but like I like that. I like being painted in a corner of our own design, and we have to work on it because you get what you ask for, and you have all this water, and you're like, oh my God, I can't focus on it. The light's not working right, or whatever. And it's that large scale type of filmmaking that really kind of challenges you, because you can get wrapped up in it in technical terms. But what's great about this crew and my interaction with them, we tended to focus down. We're like, as the bigger and bigger things get, you say, what is this for? What emotional moment is this for? Why are we doing that? And it's amazing to do that on a television show. It's not often that you get that depth of visual, texture outside of like a big movie, or something.
I love it.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Well, you have been a real joy to talk to. It was a lot of fun.
This has been fun.
I would love to have you back. And I mean, when is the next part of? When's the next
I think
part of Ozark
not long. I think it's going to be a couple months. It's not a big thing.
Oh,
so
I'm
not sure, but I think it's around a few months, 2-3 months.
Oh my God! I mean, we ate up all our time talking about Ozark, which is fine. I mean, that's why you were here. But I mean, you're
there's some things
check
coming
out his IMDb. Your music video collection is just like you have worked on some of the greatest music videos. Just that in and of itself would be an amazing content.
I love coming out of that, and I love working with people that come out of it. A lot of the Ozark crew came out of the music video world, and we understand like doing videos back in the 90s and early 2000s. You have all this money for nothing, and you waste just so much money. But then also you go from a video like that to go to a $10,000 video where you have to make everything out of nothing. And I love guys, I love people, I love crew and collaborators that come from that vibe. It's this kind of punk rock aesthetic with buttoned up tweed suit. So.
I love that. Well, the show is Ozark season 4, episode 1 through 7 is out now, and then part 2 sounds like it's just around the corner. So check it out. Please let us know what you think of this episode. If you have additional questions for Shawn, send them our way on Go Creative Show, and of course your Instagram. People can find you there, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
It's getting taken over by my puppy, but yeah.
Well, that happens when you get a new puppy. That's just, it's the way it is.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This was awesome. This was so fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad you had a good time. You're a blast to chat with, and we will definitely have you back. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
All right, I want to thank Shawn Kim, Director of Photography of Ozark Season 4, the final season of Ozark. So please check it out if you haven't already, and let us know what you think of the episode. You can let us know on any of our social media profiles and, of course, our website as well, gocreativeshow.com. I want to thank our sponsor today, Filmmakers Academy. Master your craft at Filmmakers Academy. If you head over to gocreativeshow.com/Filmmakers Academy, you can get 10% off with promo code GoCreative10. GoCreative10 for 10% off over at Filmmakers Academy. I also want to thank Connor Crosby, our producer. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com. And of course, Dave Siegel from siegelsound.com. He mixes and masters and makes the show sound so good. Of course, follow us on your favorite podcast app, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. And if you want to follow me, you can find me on Instagram at Ben Consoli, BenConsoli. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time on another episode of the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.